You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com. You're listening to the We Are Libertarians network. Learn more at wearelibertarians.com.
This is episode number 242 of East Centralia's favorite podcast. I'm Jeremiah Morrell. Today I'm joined by executive video producer Zach Burcham, my forever co-host Dakota Davis, and a cast. What's going on, man?
That's right. Today in the studio, we have both of the candidates that are seeking the Libertarian Party of Indiana nomination for the United States Senate seat. On Jeremiah's right, we have James. How do you pronounce your last name, James?
Sceniak. Yep.
Sceniak. All right.
You can think scenic scenes with Sceniak. It's also a tagline. So,
all right. And then we also have Mr. William Henry, Will Henry, on my left. If you're watching the video, we're going to be talking to both of these guys about issues that the country is facing and their opinions on them. This is not a formal debate, more of just a conversation between the two candidates so that you can decide at the Libertarian Party of Indiana State Convention, which is coming up in the month of March, just a couple weeks or 1 week away.
Yeah, or it's a week from Saturday is the big decision day. This show is about our lives in rural Indiana. We're here to push your boundaries and make you think as individuals. Sometimes we'll provoke you. Other times we'll make you laugh. Hopefully you'll always learn something new. If you're a member of our Patreon, you got to hear an old standby routine of me bullying my co-host. How'd it go, Dakota? Did you enjoy it?
I got it done.
You did. You complied, and it's official. It's you're going to do something with the patrons.
That's right.
Against your will.
To find out what Jeremiah bullied me into, you have to go to patreon.com/Boss Hog of Liberty, or just go to bosshogofliberty.com and find the Support Now button. That's where you can go to support the show every month. That's how we pay the bills around here. The electric bill. The heat is all electric, so that's,
we're coming out of the heating season.
That's right.
Just in time for the war to start.
It's been high, so we have to, we got to make up for that somewhere. We also have rent to pay around here. The dues get paid every month to make sure that this show gets put out every week to you, the listeners. So to support us, once again, bosshogofliberty.com. Find the Support Now button. If you support at $50 or more a month, then you get a shout out at the front of every episode. And those folks are Miss Christy Avery from all the way in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Mr. Jonathan Phillips, who's our favorite car dealer in the continental United States, Andy Moore Buick GMC and Fishers. And then the amazing trucker himself, the man who supplies us with memes while he's on the road, Mr. Anthony Meyer.
I heard Anthony needs a new turbo for his truck. It's not.
Is that the problem?
It's not good today.
You said last week
not good.
He was having issues.
Yeah, it's he's reporting some turbo issues.
Well, that's never good. It seems like that's the first thing to go on diesel engines, anyways. The turbo always happens.
The man operates in Minnesota and Wisconsin in the wintertime, so I'm sure it's not good on the equipment.
We also have a sponsor for the candidate series, which the candidate series is going to be starting 2 weeks from today. This is kind of
the Henry County ballot.
The
candidate
Henry
series.
County.
This is also series. A candidate series of sorts.
Yeah, definitely
the federal candidate series.
Well, bigger candidates. These guys have more people to reach than the folks that we're having on 2 weeks from now. In the Henry County candidate series, we just want to give them a shout out at the front of this episode too, just to make sure that they know that they are special. Those folks are at Weiland's Flowers here in Henry County. I got Audrey a beautiful bouquet from there of roses for Valentine's Day.
Zach made me look bad, and he ordered some Weiland's Flowers for April for Valentine's Day.
I did, but
they're incredible people. So by 4:00, they had a bouquet over to Sarah as well. We just got off of the cruise, and I didn't have a lot of time.
But Sarah, last minute
they worked a miracle, and thankfully our dog did not kill the flower delivery guy, but he was somewhat terrified of our mutts.
We also have the Slick Pickle, which is Newcastle's own party bus, and then Big Bounce Inflatables, where you can rent all of your bounce house party needs. And also T-Chip stores to get your Boss Hog of Liberty merchandise, tchip.com/BHO1234 or BHO mug. We also have a link tree for that. That's on the website, and the producer Zach is going to put that in the live stream chat to make it easy for you. So, to get to introducing our candidates, why don't we start with you, James? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your background and how you got in the Libertarian Party.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm James Sceniak, and I'm a behavior therapist. So I work with kids with autism, and we do a lot of behavior and social skills. So I'm absolutely excited to take some of these skills to politics and using that. As far as the Libertarian Party, I really followed politics a lot, mostly from the Republican side from a very early age. The Twin Towers made a huge impact on me. And ever since then, following like George W. Bush and following how politics works was one of my priorities. So looking at the Libertarian Party, I heard about Rupert, I heard about different candidates, but Gary Johnson was the one that really won me over. And when I realized that the most sensible talking points were coming from the Libertarian Party, I followed along. And then when I saw Rainwater run, I realized in Indiana what was going on with how huge we were becoming and the aspects of that. So I went from a little L following Gary Johnson to, really committed last year. So I did a lot with his campaign as far as donations, following his watch parties, etc., and then getting my friends excited about it. And so after that, I decided to make a commitment to the party. So I became a national party member. I became a lifetime Indiana member. I became a 1994 society member. And most importantly, I really like to point out that I became a local member because that's where change is really made. And I love, serving our neighbors. So the libertarian aspect of that and serving in Johnson County has been awesome. And we have a great chair down there, Matt. So that's kind of where I came from, following Gary Johnson to becoming a committed libertarian member.
All right. And same question to you, Will.
Yeah, I'm Will Henry. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I was a journalist. I served in Afghanistan and Kuwait. I worked full-time at the Joint Force Headquarters for the Indiana National Guard for a number of years, working with the governor's office and some of these other state emergency agencies to be able to coordinate National Guard response and be able to cover that as far as communications goes and journalism. Went on those couple deployments, got a lot of skills under my belt, brought those back with me, started working with organizations like the American Legion, started to apply that in the communications realm with the Legion, and then started to work in the advocacy and administration portion of the organization. So after working in the advocacy and administrative portion, I really pushed a lot of veterans issues across the finish line for a lot of veterans organizations. We binded together and really got our priorities in order and really brought it to the legislature so they could understand what the veterans needed in the state. So being able to move that, it was a very successful few years that we had at the State House doing that. And we got a lot of things covered, for veterans. And really during that portion of time, libertarianism started to become more apparent to me working in the organizational sector and working into the advocacy and activism. There are a lot of libertarians who, care about those things and are active in the organization. So started to become aware of the libertarian message, started getting more involved with the cannabis scene after the veteran stuff, help expose some wrongdoing and fraud, waste, abuse at the state agencies for the Indiana Department of Veterans Affairs and things like that. And really started to get into the cannabis scene. And that's where I really started to come in close in contact with a lot of more libertarians and started to really look into that and read into it and understand what that was and to realize myself that I was a libertarian and I hadn't even realized, that I was stuck in the duopoly. I thought the two parties were my only two choices and wasn't getting that message down to my individual level until really started getting active in advocacy and activism in the state.
And Will, to remind myself, you joined the party in 2020, is that right? In the 2020 cycle, and you were on the statewide ticket.
Yeah, and that was really when I first started getting hands-on involved with the party. A lot of my stuff was just kind of organizational aspects where we could, meet and a lot of libertarians pushing for cannabis reform. You have those interactions, and then you get, sucked into the party too, because you really want to start making a difference and having those advocacy roles and learning the roles of the government and having those type of skills, gained, and that knowledge gained was really applicable once I started getting into the political scene.
So I had one question on here that I thought was a good opener. With libertarians on the ballot, we've talked about it a lot. a big part of running for statewide office or a national office as a libertarian is just your messaging, trying to get libertarian messaging out on a statewide platform or a debate stage against mainstream candidates and getting into mainstream news cycles. So we can start with you, Will. Why do you think that you would be the best candidate to represent the Libertarian Party of Indiana on the ballot?
I have the skills and experience from the state government and the knowledge from the federal government in advocacy and activism too. I've been very busy in those realms and in those sectors. Really, just the ability to organize and get people together and pushing in the same direction. And a lot of what I did with the veterans realm, those organizations hadn't really been communicative together. They were having a lot of beef between the organizations too. But to be able to bring those organizations together in those capacities to be able to work together was a real challenge because there was years and years and years of things going on. But to be able to do that really showed that organizational ability to bring these parties together who don't necessarily see eye to eye on everything, but we have common goals that we need to reach. And to be able to take those kind of skills and apply them directly are the type of experience and knowledge that I have, as well as, I have a good connection with the media across the state already with the veterans realm and the cannabis community as well. I've done a lot of, work in the communications and media as well, commentating on veterans issues, Afghan issues and things like that in the local medias. And we need to be seen out front, shoulder to shoulder with the other two parties too. And that is, we're seeing a little more of that with the Libertarian Party here in central Indiana, with Mark Rutherford and some of these folks being invited on some of the panels, and we get a libertarian perspective on that. We need more of that. We need to coordinate more of that, and we need to make the libertarian message more, more applicable to people, so they could, get rid of some of these stereotypes and some of these perspectives that aren't necessarily correct about the party.
So, James, tell me about how you use the platform as the Libertarian Party's nominee.
Yeah, definitely. So the first two words that come to mind is public service, and everything I've done as far as my occupation is about serving others, and I want to serve the LPIN. I want to help us to grow. And that's my pro-growth campaign. So the aspect is when I decided to run, I wanted to use the experiences that I've had from the past and utilize it to grow the LPIN. So the first thing I looked at is, how do we build campaign teams? And I brought members onto my team and I said, hey, you have the willingness. Let's give you the skills. And this isn't even just about my campaign. It was about being able to take these individuals, grow their experience, and be able to take them to other candidates in the future. So the pro-growth aspect on the candidate front, I want to build those teams so that others can utilize them. And then additionally help to grow the LPIN through the affiliates. So that's being committed on the Johnson County level, but also going around the whole state and looking at best practices and what each county is doing correctly and what sometimes different counties need help with. So, connecting resources, utilizing our knowledge that we already have around the state, but helping those who aren't sure who to ask or where to ask. So growing the LPIN has been my number one priority. I've been doing this since July. I'm excited for it. In addition to that, coming from the Republican side, I've run with state Senate campaigns as far as I was on the ballot, but I was volunteering behind. So I have the experience of how to run a campaign. I knew the skills that are required for this. So I wanted to take that to the Libertarian Party, and that's essentially what I was about. So serving the LPIN, it's not about what the nomination could do for me. It's about what I can do with the nomination for the LPIN. And that's shining the spotlight on other candidates. It's helping us grow, and I'm absolutely thrilled to do this.
So, yeah, in the last two U.S. Senate cycles, Lucy Brenton has carried that torch, and you've got, I guess, the opportunity to participate in some statewide debates through the Indiana Debate Commission.
Correct.
Yeah.
So one other thing with the LPIN is the Donald Rainwater gubernatorial campaign in 2020, which was seen as a giant success. I think that got National Libertarian Party
absolutely a success
media coverage. So yeah, that was a big deal. I think that puts the LPIN in a pretty good position as it sits right now. So the question for both of you guys, and we can start with you, James, is how you would take that platform, that foundation that was built by the Rainwater campaign, and how you would use that the messaging in that campaign to help your Senate race.
I think it's important, real quick before you start, it's important for the audience to know that the Don and the Rain Barter campaign did finish second in this county and many others. I think they were 21 or 22% in Henry County.
21% in Henry County.
I mean, just massive numbers and opportunity. They'd be the first statewide candidate to come back on the ballot since then.
Absolutely. So the Rainwater campaign did a lot of things right. They ran a very well done state race. And what I looked at is how they communicated to Hoosiers and how do we attract that vote from not just Libertarians, but Hoosiers across the state. And so that's what I want to take on the federal level is using those communication abilities and looking at the issues that really matter to Hoosiers. So, when I was prioritizing my issues, I was looking at, okay, do Hoosiers care about this issue and how can I communicate it well to them? A lot of times as Libertarians, we come up with ideas, but we don't present solutions well. And that's being able to just communicate and let them know that we're there to serve them and give them solid solutions that are Libertarian. And Rainwater did that well. He did that well with the mask mandates. And I'm going to do that on the federal level with my 3 issues that I'm absolutely excited to present to Hoosiers because I think it will resonate with them and they'll see real solutions and it's coming from a Libertarian.
All right. And Will, as a member of the Rainwater campaign,
being on that ticket was an absolute, thrill. It was a very big privilege to be included in that, on that ticket. I'm very proud of that campaign and that whole campaign team did absolutely phenomenal and it was very fluid and it came together very well. And that was because of a huge grassroots effort across the state, to push that, campaign forward. And it worked. And we had, so much movement throughout the state. And now we have, voting data to go back. And now we have all of these active affiliates working throughout the state. And that, we created an energy throughout the state. And that is still being shown today with all of these affiliates standing up, re-affiliating, getting busy. And we've seen that throughout the state travels. The thousands of miles that we've driven across this state in my current campaign, I can see that these folks have really organized and they're starting to get themselves together. They have agendas. They're starting to go through their bylaws and make changes and adapt their organizations to what their needs are at the local level. And that's really so important because at the local level is where we're going to have a lot of impact on viable candidates. And that is there's a lot of uncontested slots throughout the state at the county and local levels that are open. And really getting folks energized and getting their names out there onto these ballots and signing up for some of these positions are going to be key, but also keeping those affiliates going and active throughout the year and making sure that they're organized and continuing doing that public service type of things too.
So as Dakota and I were talking about some of the topics that we wanted to cover, and this is just these are just general ideas. And if you guys have other issues that you're putting at the forefront of your campaign, I want to get into those as well tonight. But an issue that Dakota and I had
I pushed back.
We had a spat today, and he's like, "I'm tired of talking about COVID."
The show notes were late because of what we're going to get into later, which is Russia invading Ukraine.
Yeah,
and it's been on my mind all day, and I've been doing a lot of reading, and it's like all of a sudden it was like 2:00 and I hadn't started show notes yet. And I was like, So then Jeremiah's like COVID-19. And I was like, how you expect me to talk about COVID-19 when Russia has invaded Ukraine?
That's just the news of the day, man. It's important, but I think the 2020 election was shaped greatly by COVID and to say, okay, you know what? I think that we're done. Wave 3 is over. Omicron is that's the end of it. And we don't have to worry about it or think about it as we select our next federal candidates. I think that may be short-sighted. And obviously we've seen a lot of government power used in the last 2.5 years revolving around COVID. And I know the state of Indiana hasn't let go of that yet. So I know it's important to me to hear from each of you, and I can't remember where we're at as far as the baton. I think maybe Will should Will get the next question? I've lost track. Sure. All right, we're informal here, so James, if I'm treating you unfairly, just
No, I think it was his turn actually.
All right,
so
where do you stand, Will? You're maybe COVID fatigued out too at this point, but I still want to hear a little bit, I guess.
I'm in a kind of a unique perspective because I actually helped handle a lot of the specimen for these vaccine trials at laboratory down in Indianapolis. And in that work, in the 6 months that I was working at that laboratory, we had the peak of the PCR testing and the swab testing coming in, and the peak of the vaccine trial specimen coming in, and to the point where this laboratory ran out of freezer space, and we're storing everything on, palletized on dry ice inside of every floor, every bit of floor space inside of here. To see, and to go through all of that and to see how fast some of these pharmaceutical companies have pushed their stuff to the front, because the larger pharmaceutical companies were able to pay more to have their stuff front loaded. That's why we only have a few vaccines right now approved from these larger companies, because they were able to pay to front load their stuff. And those studies got completed first, and that data got to the FDA first as well, out of this, laboratory that I worked at. And when you see that happening, that's profits being put in front of, people. And that is just an effort of a lot of money being pushed forward. And in that, understanding how that operation happened, and that happened, and also knowing that June in 2019, they renamed the Pandemic All Hazards and Innovation Act of 2019. They added the pandemic in there to have a set of standard to react to something pandemic. And this is an extension off the Patriot Act stuff too, on down with the emergency services personnel being able to react, Homeland Security and all of these other emergency agencies that were created after the Patriot Act. This was not by accident. This was by design, what happened. And you can go back through the legislature and you can see these steps being taken to being able to kind of flex this type of executive authoritative control because of the legislature giving that authority to the executive branch. And that's what happened over the last 20 years since the Patriot Act had been enabled, and it has grown to this point. If you go back and look at that policy that was passed in 2019, it was June 2019, you'll see that they changed the requirements for the pandemic and added pandemic to that. And it just, 9 months later, they're enacting that emergency order.
So is there a specific change forward looking, assuming you're the United States Senator from Indiana, dealing with pandemic response that you would want to see happen?
Yes. And that is exactly what we were doing before this response. And that was those who are sick, isolate yourself. Those who are at risk, isolate yourself, protect yourself. And that shouldn't have changed. That type of the response shouldn't have changed. There was really no reason, because it was just as deadly as cold and flu in our environment. And those who were at risk had another risk in their environment. So why would we completely change everyone's daily lives to react to a virus in our environment that is no more deadly than cold or flu? And the vaccine obviously is no more effective than the cold or flu vaccine either. To completely change our lives because of that, I can go back and look at these pieces of legislation that have passed to increase that reach of government down to the individual level.
All right, let's hear from James on the COVID envelope here.
Yeah, definitely. Well, anyone can see that the government overreached on this. That's you don't have to be on any inside, but it's clear violation of individual rights. And on the federal level, we can see that with vaccinations, right? It was a conspiracy theory. Oh, they're going to mandate vaccination cards, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But no, we're seeing it in real time where Biden tried it. The courts pushed back, but there's still a lot of legal issues. So we're clearly not over this aspect of medical freedom. And so that's something I want to take to the Senate with my Medical Freedom Act. And the idea is that politicians should absolutely not be our physicians. There's clear reasons why, but they cannot make blanket medical decisions for Hoosiers or all across America. And if you take any pill bottle, throw them, any of your cabinets, you look at it, same thing with vaccinations, by the way, you'll see side effects, right? And side effects are very real consequences to taking medications. They're there because somebody negatively was affected somewhere. So they aren't just made up, but they do happen to people and individuals. So when we make a medical decision for ourselves, we have to weigh the consequences, and often the benefits do outweigh the consequences. So we make those decisions based on our guidance with our physician. But that's a personal decision that absolutely needs to be made by an individual. So politicians need to take a step back. They need to understand that the power belongs to the individual when it comes to medical decisions. So my Medical Care Act is just that. It's putting it back into the hands of the people. So on the Senate level, that's what I would do. Additionally, with, just understanding and putting communication out, numbers, we can talk about how COVID actually was a little bit more deadly than the flu, but there are responsible actions that as individuals we can take. Those are, making sure that you're well when you're going out in public. If a business asks you to wear a mask, politely wear a mask. It's not that hard of an issue to be responsible around others and to respect other people's decisions.
So what I kind of had, the drum I've been beating for the last 6 to 9 months on this program is that if the federal government was actually serious about dealing with this, that would be, hey, make sure that people have tests at home, get them to them, pass out N95 masks, get them to them. And the federal government did finally do that. My test kit's sitting right there in my backpack, just out of the camera shot.
Mine showed up yesterday.
It arrived yesterday. So I signed up for them. They were supposed to be available in the new year. Is this the federal government that we're signing up for? This is you want to sign up to be a part of this mess, James?
Absolutely not. I mean, it is a mess. And
as our syndicator said, thanks for the COVID test. I've healed now. I'm good. But Spengel will get it 3 or 4 more times. He's already had it 3 times.
But the issue is most politicians did not go to medical school, right? I have a sister that's a doctor of PT. I understand by watching her the process of a lot of these medical decisions and how they're made by physicians and individuals as well. So federal government needs to stay out of those. But they do and can get us resources. The COVID response as far as giving the test to kids, I believe that could help prevent the spread. I mean, if you're feeling a little bit tickle in your throat, take a test. If you pass, or if you're negative, you can go out. If you're positive, stay home, be responsible. It's pretty simple. But there are solutions that we can work for, even on the federal level.
Well, last thing on the COVID-19 front is there's been a concerted effort from the current administration to pull back the monoclonal antibody treatments that have helped a lot of people. There's some evidence that it's not working as well for Omicron, but Omicron requires way less treatment regardless. But they did work really well for Delta, but we're going to stop making those. I want to know your guys' opinions on treatments, what you think the federal government could have done to help educate people on treatments and staying healthy and things like that. If they did a relatively decent job,
Dakota wants to know if he's allowed to have his horse
better.
warmer. I think that's what he's asking.
What?
They
Are
should,
you allowed to have your horse warmer?
Yeah. I want the government to provide me ivermectin with my test kit.
And that's where the medical freedom and personal sovereignty aspect comes in. For individuals to choose whatever they'd like to be their whatever they choose. That's a personal decision. That should be a human right as an individual to make that decision. And medical, if something is working for someone and it's not, would we stand in the way of that, or even trials to even stand in the way of some of these other things like hyperbaric oxygen therapy? The FDA doesn't want to use that off label, and insurance companies won't pay that, but yet it works for conditions. The FDA doesn't want to admit that those work for conditions. Just like cannabis, the FDA doesn't want to admit that cannabis works for conditions. Phytocannabinoids treat people's endocannabinoid deficiencies. It's a fact. It's science. And it's becoming more known now. In the next couple of years, we'll see more of that. But these type of medications, they should be continued to be used if there's a market for them. And there's really the medicine company themselves would be responsible for the effectiveness and the safety of that medication. As an individual company, a lot of these places, they have the vaccines are like, they have the immunity for the vaccines now and stuff. Like, that doesn't make any sense. They can't stand behind that. But the ivermectin and some of these other things that they're saying, and when I was deployed, we took a medication called, it was sort of like, hydroxychloroquine and some of these other drugs, but it was, prescribed for malaria. And these were the type of drugs that the military and the president was trying to talk about, but everyone made fun of them because of their type of detergent type of effect inside of the blood. And these are issued to the military when they go out to prevent communicable diseases in some of these locations.
It's not just a treatment for malaria, but it's also a preventative medicine as well.
And it's the standard for the military for that preventative medication. They issue it to each soldier to prevent malaria and other communicable diseases.
Right, like India, like Uttar Pradesh was giving out packages to their citizenry. Their government in India was giving out, like, all your citizens, you were getting like medicine packs. And it had a bunch of different things in it. They didn't publicize what was in it. It's all been under wraps, confidential information. But I'm kind of like wondering along those lines, like, is that something that in your mind, the federal government, even being a libertarian, viewing the federal government's role in things as being very small, do you think that is like a valid role of the federal government?
No. And, and that's limiting business. That's limiting innovation too. And I don't think that's right for the government to be limiting any type of growth or innovation that we could possibly have, any breakthroughs. And that's potentially what's happening. Doxycycline was the name of the drug I was prescribed or they give you while you're deployed in these locations.
All right, James, sorry.
No, you're good. Back to the original question about the federal government and what is their role in this, right? So the idea is that they do actually have a role, but that's communication and transparency. So they can gather data from all the states. They can find out what really is causing the deaths. We saw some conflict of, okay, if he died in an accident, but he had COVID, do we count it as a COVID death? So we need transparency with those numbers. But the idea is that they can actually collect all that data and be transparent with it so that physicians, your local physician, can have accurate data. So the federal government is really just collecting the information and being transparent with it so that we can understand the spread better and how it is spreading across the nation, and so that we can have more a unified response. But your local physicians are going to be the ones that actually make those decisions for you. Well, not for you, but on the level that they can communicate to you with your response of whatever you. Yeah, correct. What they recommend to you.
So let's shift gears. Let's hope to God we've left COVID-19 in the rearview mirror, and we can look forward to runaway inflation. As of right now, you can still get a pretty good mortgage note, but the house you buy, the price has gone bonkers. Labor's expensive, materials are expensive. If you try to buy a used car, you're paying 20% more than you were last year. And in Dakota's research for the show notes that, by the way, are available to patrons, and they were emailed out earlier or messaged out earlier today in the super secret BHOL Patreon group. 7.5% is the inflation that we experienced last year. James, you're our new senator. How are you saving my butt from losing all my savings?
So I'm absolutely glad you brought up this question because it's very relevant, and it's very relevant to Hoosiers and their budgets. My promise is to not pass any deficit spending. Todd Young is absolutely ridiculous, and we can attack him on this issue. He's going to blame it on a lot of other issues. He's already done that, but the responsibility falls back onto him. He's the second worst deficit spender. We can make a difference as Hoosiers by putting someone in with more fiscal sanity. And what I mean by that is Washington is on a crazy spending spree. We can't even call it budgets at this point. And Todd Young is doing just that. He's spending the money and being irresponsible for future generations. These debts that were occurring are going to absolutely affect our future generations, and it's wrong, and we need to take responsibility now, and we need to have an axe now. So my first promise is deficit spending. I'm not going to pass any budget that goes into deficit spending. But inflation is affecting us in real time. I talk about on the campaign trail, I was filling up for $30 my gas tank when I first started in July. Now I just filled up for $37. So we're seeing it in very real time how it's affecting us. And that's going to be something that resonates with Hoosiers. And if we can connect Todd Young to it, which we can because there's very clear dots that I've already made, and I could attack him on the debate stage right now today and show Hoosiers what he has done for their budgets, which is this inflation rate. We can show Hoosiers that there's a better way, a more responsible way, and a more sane way to do our finances in Washington, D.C.
What do you think could have been done differently to curb the inflation?
I mean, it's the spending budgets, right? So when we look at that deficit spending, we're just passing anything at this point. You know, they give me a little bit, I give them a little bit, and it ends up to be more government and bigger spending. So the more we reduce our government and the interactions it has and the responsibility it has.
So the multiple stimulus bills,
correct,
in the Trump cycle. It
goes, Trump, Biden, etc. Yeah. So all of those stimulus bills, the
infrastructure bill, I assume,
infrastructure bill,
opposition to what just passed there as well.
But I mean, that's the pattern of Washington, D.C. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. They're both looking at big government, more spending. We need to reduce that as libertarians. We need to show Hoosiers there's a better way and a more responsible way to handle budgeting, and that will lower inflation rates.
All right. Same question to you, Will. Inflation, 7.5%. What are your thoughts on it?
Printer go burr. Yeah, they just keep printing money. And the federal government knows exactly what's happening too, because as the inflation goes up, the tax rate goes up, and they receive more money because everything costs more now. So as this goes up, the government's collecting more of our tax dollars too during this time. Really, we hurt ourselves over the last couple of years with all these shutdowns and mandates, and we've seen that with a lot of sporadic empty shelves and things like that starting to happen too now. But I think a lot with the truckers starting to move through. I think the media is going to try to focus on that and try to say that some of the empty shelves are from that too, of course. But we know it's because we've messed up our own supply chains, and shutdowns have affected overall supply chains, and our ports have been also messed with over the last months, and all of that foreign dependence of some of these items coming in has been slowed down as well. But that 7.5% is absolutely that's unacceptable as citizens. We shouldn't be accepting that. And there's no real clear way to change that debt to income ratio either, or try to smash down this inflation rate right now from any of our legislators who are in office. They don't have a plan, and they haven't been opposing any of these spending bills at all.
Very often the average employee is going to get maybe a 3% raise, right? 3 to 4% raise. But if you got 7% inflation, you're going to go backwards as your household, unless you participate in the Great Resignation and you end up changing jobs, which is not particularly helpful when you're trying to keep shelves stocked, right?
Exactly.
It's all counterproductive.
Families are suffering. I mean, food supplies everyone right now is feeling the pinch. And if you aren't, you're probably doing pretty good financially, but most average people, they're feeling the pinch right now.
Would it be skeptical to think that the government's trying to inflate their way out of a big debt hole they have?
That could very well help once the inflation gets under control. They'll have a huge pile of money once, some of these taxes and some of these things get collected, and we see how much is exactly there. But I think that we'll see a larger amount than what we go into this next fiscal year. And what would you expect?
Yeah.
Peeking into our chat room, longtime Boss Hog viewer Joe Tompkins reminds us that 20 less years in Afghanistan could have solved some of this inflation as well, which is a perfect segue into the third main topic that we had outlined, and that was to deal with foreign policy. Joe Biden did withdraw troops from Afghanistan, and it wasn't viewed as having worked out well. It's kind of a sloppy exit, but that said, 20 years in, it's the first time anybody's actually accomplished anything even close to withdraw. So, Will, looking in the rearview mirror at Afghanistan and how the United States exited that, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, having a personal investment there myself from serving in Afghanistan during that conflict, it was really upsetting and depressing to see the way that the current administration handled that withdrawal. And I think a lot of people were really upset and rightfully so at the administration for making moving so quickly on that and leaving so much behind without really any explanation as to why. When we first went into Afghanistan, we disarmed the whole country. We took away their Second Amendment rights for the most part, other than hunting and shotguns and things like that. But these people didn't have means or ways to the small arms capability that we do here in the United States. And that is a great asset for us because we can organize against any invading force and be able to become soldiers ourselves if we need to be able to fight an invading force. However, Afghans, after we set up their government for them, after we set up their army for them, after we set up their police force for them, we did not, give them their arms back or means to protect themselves. So when their government failed and their army failed and their police forces failed, the citizens had nothing to protect themselves against an invading force like the Taliban. And had they had this capability, I don't believe that the Taliban would have been capable of that type of advancement and organization to come back into that country and take over the way that it did. So unfortunately, us moving away so quickly left that void, and us telling everybody that we were going to do it so quickly left that void into a disarmed country that completely got taken back over. It was a huge upset. It was a huge missteps were taken by the current administration and Department of Defense, and we've learned huge lessons from that, I think, to never do that again in that fashion.
Yeah, we said that in 1972, though, as well.
Well, yeah, and that's what we would hope. And when we left Afghanistan, the Biden or the Obama and Biden administration said that we were out of Iraq when I was deployed to Kuwait, and we in fact had troops in that country at the time cleaning up the mess that the contractors couldn't clean up too. So there were operations going on that time as well, but it was just a mess.
Yeah, for sure.
James, it's all yours, man.
Yeah. So, it just comes back to exit strategy. And it was very unclear of our exit strategy all along. And this is part of the reason why we need to look at why Congress needs to take back the act of war. When we originally went in, nobody expected us to be there 20 years. So when Congress should take back their powers of war, and if they're going to do something like that, we're going to look at why are we there? And what's the exit strategy? Because ultimately we need that exit strategy. There should have been no reason we were there 20 years. And that's something that's absolutely ridiculous. And it's an overstep. We need to stop policing the world, and we need better decisions when it comes to military aspects.
Yeah. So we, as libertarians, we talk about, getting out of a lot of foreign wars. Afghanistan was obviously a huge area that we were in, but staying on this, and whenever we're talking about taking troops out of other foreign conflicts, what do you think could have been done differently with the withdrawal from Afghanistan? Do you think it could have been done differently? Do you think it could have gone smoother, or you just had to rip the Band-Aid off and get everyone out there? What do you think, James?
Besides being done earlier, it should have been done way earlier. At some point, we just have to exit. And unfortunately, the way we exited was not well done. We should have had a little bit more strategy with that. We shouldn't leave our resources over there like we did. But yeah, there definitely needs to be more clear exit strategies when it comes to military action. And that's something that did not happen. And honestly, 20 years, we could have had a lot of people make that same decision. And nobody made that decision and nobody did it well. So
it went through 4 presidencies.
Correct.
Right? it was Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden by the time, from when we started to when we exited. And
that's my point is Biden finally made that decision, and we can argue that how he did it was wrong, but at some point it had to be done.
Yeah. So I know, Will, you kind of touched on that a little bit with keeping the populace armed a bit there, but do you think as we pull, if you're in the Senate and we go to pull more troops out, do you think we need to just do it like we did, or do you think we need to do it differently?
No, there should have been a systematic approach to that. I don't know, and their intelligence, the military's intelligence, they have eyes on the region. They're being informed each day of what's happening too, and we don't know what types of other things were happening in the region. Now we know. Now we can see what's happening in the region where this shift of resources is kind of sort of going. But taking our troops out so fast and not handing that off to those Afghan army and the Afghan police and the government themselves, I think that really left a lot of folks standing there without really understanding, what their role was in that handoff. There wasn't really any strategy to hand off those reins to these folks. And when we left these large facilities like Bagram and Kandahar, when we had, 40, 50,000 people at one time living on some of these bases like that, these are huge places. When you just completely vacate places like that, that's a lot of facilities. That's a lot of living area and things that the local community is going to start getting into and things. But you just disappear, and all of the equipment's there, and a lot of these things are there, and there was really no structure to exit out, fluidly. It was they did yank it off, and
it's like running down the road in a truck and missing a shift, right? It's just a big thud.
Mm-hmm.
All right. James, this is a tough topic. We're going to get into the Ukraine a little bit. There's some big tension, and obviously depending upon what committee you serve in the Senate, you've got some oversight responsibilities. But you also have the power to declare war, and there are folks that are starting to brace for some American involvement at some level, if nothing else, just declaring sanctions with Russia invading the Ukraine today, this week. You've got to look forward a little bit, and today's March. You're not a senator yet, but what's it look like if you're Senator James and January of 2023 and you're faced with this conflict?
It's a great question. I'm glad you asked. First and foremost, we should always seek a peaceful resolution. Next, as a nation, we cannot make a unilateral decision to go to war with Russia or any nation. We have to work with the international community and look at what sanctions need to happen and look for an actual plan and solution. Same thing. President Biden cannot make a unilateral decision. We need Congress to take back the acts of power when it comes to declaring war. So that cannot be a unilateral decision as a nation. It cannot be a unilateral decision as Biden. If that came across my desk, for me to even consider something, it would look a lot like Desert Storm, where we have a clear entry, a clear plan of action, and most importantly, a clear exit plan. Because the exit plan, we're not going to spend 20 more years in a nation with military action. That's absolutely ridiculous, and we just cannot do that. So with those three things being considered, looking at the international community, and looking for peaceful resolutions, that's what we need to look forward to. Sometimes military action seems like a glacier in the water and it just can't be avoided. But we don't have to be the Titanic. We can steer away from it, and we can look for those peaceful resolutions. And as a senator, that's foremost my priority is how do we have those peaceful resolutions?
Will, what do you say?
We don't need to get into more war. We've had a lot of war over the last 20 years. And our involvement in Ukraine, we have a State Department and embassy locations there in Ukraine. We do have individuals who protect those facilities and things like that. And it's been limited now. A lot of these folks have been exited the country. They've evacuated a lot of those folks. Outside of our foreign diplomacy with Ukraine, that's our assets in Ukraine right now. And really the Ukraine army, the Ukraine citizens and and they have the ability to arm themselves too. They have the Second Amendment. And this has been something that's been talked about, for a number of weeks now. We have known that this could have been imminent today, could have happened at any moment over these last months that the positioning has been in place. I know the damage done from deploying troops overseas. I've seen it. I've dealt with the veterans sector. And we have to be able to take care of these individuals. And how are we going to create more veterans if we can't even take care of the ones that we have right now? So U.S. getting involved on the ground outside of the State Department and our, assets there, I think would not be a good idea, at all, to be, outside of what the other nations are putting forth as well in this alliance that we have. A lot of times the United States has put a lot more into these conflicts than what a lot of these other nations have. And we don't have them. We don't have the money. We're in a huge debt right now. And we can't even take care of the veterans we've created over the last 20 years. So why are we even talking about getting into a conflict of this magnitude overseas, especially after pulling out of Afghanistan under those terms that we're ending wars. And then now there's all this talk about getting back involved again. So I don't think the sanctions are going to do anything to affect Russia. I don't think that anything that we can do as far as diplomacy is going to, it's started. You know what I mean?
Let me back up just for a second. You don't think that any American sanctions would have an effect on Russia or change their behavior?
I think that they would temporarily, but overall they would find a way around those sanctions, and they would get around them. They would adapt and overcome those. I really don't know what the answer is. It's diplomacy. It's being able to understand what exactly they want and what they, accomplish everything on the ground. There's really no clear objective other than to take that land for Russia right now. And they've declared this these two states sovereign themselves and not able to now, Ukraine isn't able to join the forces of that alliance because of that dispute right now. They've said that. They've created that and they've sanctioned that themselves. So I think a lot of this, we're looking at this, over the last weeks, and we've been preparing for, the media has been asking for this to be happening rather than, actually getting, things prepared in the region for the country to defend itself. They have an standing army. They have citizens who can protect themselves. And I watched those Russian trucks move over that border uncontended in those checkpoint locations. And, that's an absolute travesty to see those checkpoint locations empty as well.
So looking beyond foreign policy, I guess this is a conversation for each of you. And I want to hear what your number one priority would be as a U.S. Senator. What's the one issue that you expect to advocate for, or the way that you expect to use the office of Senate for the people of Indiana? We'll start with you, Will. What's top priority number one? Somebody asks you why you're running, what you want to get accomplished. What's the top tip of the spear?
Absolutely, financial stability. And right now, with the deficit we have and the businesses that we've heard over the last couple of years with the shutdowns and mandates, the service industry has been destroyed. A lot of these fast food restaurants are struggling to even keep staff in because they've moved on somewhere else. They're working in the warehouses and the manufacturing areas now. So it's been really tough to get the service area back and fulfilled again. And we see a lot of this increases in wages and things happening at those levels too to try to entice people to come back to those positions. I think that we've hurt our economy tremendously over the last couple of years, and we really need to focus on building those small businesses up, giving them. We've seen during the emergency orders that we can forgo some of this permitting and forgo some of the certifications and some of these things that the agencies require for small businesses to try to do that at a federal level, to focus more on the growth of the smaller and medium-sized businesses as well, to give them a boost, so we can start becoming more of a production and manufacturing country rather than a consumer society.
Tip of the spear for Senator James Sceniak. What's it going to be?
Yeah, so definitely, I'm out here to serve Hoosiers. And if I'm going to push one issue in the beginning, it's something that I can get done, right? So I'm going to be able to work with both sides. And I believe that we can really change the conversation when it comes to my vet care program, because this is taking an intrusive and wasteful program like the VA that has failed our veterans across the nation. And it's utilizing a libertarian approach and a solution. And when we talk with the Republicans and we talk with the Democrats, we can change the conversation about how we get our care to our veterans. And it's a simple solution. It's removing the wasteful program, but allowing for a veteran's personal care account. And so what this does is it takes that wasteful funding and still gives it directly to the veteran so that they can have medical freedom. They can be able to choose the physician that best meets their needs. They can choose the location that's most convenient for them. When I first started running, I was working at Books and Brews. It's a local brewery. And one of my regulars comes in and he said, okay, I know you announced. What are you going to do for me as a veteran? And I was talking to him and I said, libertarians, we push for gun rights. We push for individual freedom. He's like, oh, that's fine. All that is great. But I want to know what you're going to do for veterans. And so I was using my think tank. I was using my team. And I said, what can we do? And the idea is that with all this wasteful funding that's currently being just thrown out, we can better utilize that to serve through the veteran's personal care account. So that money gets redirected to them and they have the freedom to choose how to utilize that. And then there is a second portion that goes to the long-term care needs, or let's say they lost a limb and there's expenses with that. So there is a second portion, but it eliminates a lot of the middle ground. It eliminates the whole program, and it's definitely a libertarian solution. And I think Republicans and Democrats can get on board with this, and we could come up with an actual tangible way that we can make a difference for Hoosiers and for our whole nation.
Fantastic. We are at the point in the program where we're at the end of our scheduled issues. So we traditionally go around the room and we have final thoughts. And this is where everybody gets to clean up anything they left out, anything they didn't find a way to get to it quite yet. It's an opportunity for producer Zach to ask any questions that he's thought of as an undecided voter over yonder. You got any questions for the candidates? You got anything to plug?
No, nothing to plug. Be safe going home.
You want to thank Dakota for keeping the lights on this week and for not getting called out in the middle of the show? Because I thought for sure his phone was going to buzz and he was going to bolt on
I'll
me.
give Dakota a preemptive thank you for tomorrow morning when I wake up and my power stayed on all night.
be thankful if you do your job and keep my power on all night. Yeah.
We still have an hour left of ice.
It's still, I was going to say it's still early. And last time he kept us up to date on how close we were to not good things happening, and it would have enjoyed ignorance. Time.
We were on the absolute brink of the entire town going dark all day during the big storm. All right. Well, thanks for doing your job, Mr. Producer Guy.
I try.
All right, James. What else do we need to know? How do we follow you? I know the state chairman Evan McMahon is going to slap you guys both around if you don't ask somebody for money at some point and tell people how to contribute to your campaign. How do people learn more about you? How do they find your full issues tab? How do they give money? How's all this work?
Yeah, definitely. So as a politician, you already said it. I wouldn't be a politician if I didn't ask for money. That could be done on my website, which is www.sceniak4senate.com. That's www.sceniakforsenate.com. And there is a donate button on there. So please, we are going to utilize that money so that we can reach as many Hoosiers with a libertarian message as possible. My final thoughts is that libertarians, we need solutions, and we need tangible solutions that are presented to Hoosiers and that can reach across the aisle and bring in voters. We're not going to get, Rainwater did that by his 11% by reaching across the aisles and bringing people into the freedom message. So we need that message that allows for individuals from all walks of life to understand that freedom is going to be value for them, and it's going to keep an intrusive government out of their way. So let's message our branding correctly, and let's do this correct and show Hoosiers that we are a tangible party and we can win elections both on the federal level and the local level. And this is the year to do that. And I'm excited to shine the spotlight on a lot of the local elections. So please consider me for the nomination for the U.S. Senate race. It's just a little bit over a week away, and I'm absolutely thrilled for next weekend. So thank you for having me here, and I really appreciate your time.
Glad to have all of the Libertarian candidates on again. Will Henry, tell us what we've missed and how to donate, learn more, support, et cetera, et cetera.
You can go to my website, williamhenry.us. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, getting more active on Twitter and some of these other locations. I am, I'm just really excited to be able to have this opportunity to run again. After the rainwater success, I think that, a lot of people in the state are really open to the libertarian message. They're understanding the principles. They're understanding what we're about, more personal freedom, less government. And we're showing that, we can offer the best and perform the best of what these other parties cannot, and what they've been promising for such a long time. They haven't been delivering, as we've seen with the constitutional carry in the State House here recently as well. Really, I've worked a lot, with these offices, Todd Young's staff, these senators' staff, Joe Donnelly, even Dick Lugar when I was taking photos for the National Guard. I've got a lot of experience at what these offices do and some of the things that they conduct and the committees and the commissions that they, work on, and how this legislation and how these things move through the government. I have that practical experience. I have, the military experience and the administrative experience at the state level to be able to handle that type of organization and movement at Capitol Hill. And, I just want people to know that, I'm going to fight for them at Washington, D.C. I'm going to do, what's right and do the bidding of the people, not what I want as an individual so much. It's about what the people want, and it's about what they need to be represented properly. And they're not getting that representation in Washington, D.C., and I want to bring that representation.
All right. D squared.
I have a couple things. First of all, I want to thank you guys for coming tonight. This was a good episode. And also, Jeremiah, I had a Facebook memory come up that said that it was like 3 years ago last week we moved into this studio for the first time. We were having Chris Spangle on for the inaugural episode.
Yes.
And everything looked wonky. There was no decorations, no American flag.
It looked naked.
Nothing on the walls. But with that being said, I think that it's great. I think that wanted to say thank you to all of our Patreon supporters and all the people who listen, who have stuck with us. 3 years is seems like an accomplishment to have our own studio, to be moved out of my spare bedroom at my house.
Thank God, Dakota says.
Yeah, so I think that's...
I don't know. I think it was really cool that you had every elected official in town rolling through your hallway upstairs.
Even though we cut it pretty slim some months, but this is wanted to say thank you to those folks.
It's gonna be okay. I do want to make a point to the audience. I don't know, we have a new audience that doesn't always listen to us, coming from the LP side, that may not catch every episode. And we have a number of folks that listen every week, regardless, all over the country. And then, of course, we have our local contingent as well. These gentlemen are running for the Libertarian nomination for U.S. Senate. That'll be picked on Saturday, March 5th, by the Libertarian Party delegates. Those are sent by by joining the Libertarian Party and going through the delegate process from your county. They are not on the May primary, so the Democrats and Republicans will spend taxpayer dollars, and that's how they are going to get to your November ballot. These guys raise their own money, spend their own money, rent their own space to elect to determine who's going to have that ballot access spot. They're going to work through it as a party. In their own private function, and a couple hundred people are going to make the determination as to who's there in the fall. But even if you can't be a delegate, but you liked what you heard, reach out to them, and I'm sure that they'll find ways to let you help support them. So, I want to thank you both for taking the time to do it. It's awesome. Been a candidate 4 times myself. It is not easy, and it gets always good to get the reps, and it's important for the process that you guys are running. So, thank you guys very much. 2 little pieces of housekeeping on my side. Number 1, our buddy Kyle Robbins, many-time member of the show. He's starting his racing season this week. He texted me today. He's on I-75 heading down to Florida, running the sprint car. So he'll be running down in the short tracks outside of St. Pete when the Indy cars are going. So Newcastle Zone is back on the short oval. And we did our cruise, and the folks at Caterpie, James Watterson, gave us hooked us up with those Caterpie shoelaces.
Oh yeah, I finally put mine on this week.
I wore them the entire cruise. They were incredible, awesome. I didn't know what to expect. I'm going to buy another pair of my other pair of shoes. They were fantastic.
Yeah, I have a pair of like old work boots that I wear like doing yard work, and I think that I'm going to actually buy a long pair for those. Like they're really nice. They keep your shoe tight.
Yeah,
but they're also easy to slip on and off.
They're like
shoes,
adult Velcro.
They're the best for walk around shoes.
Oh yeah,
yeah, for just like my around the house. I wear them to work, and I've got them all night now, and I'm like a child. I've got one set of blue and one set of orange because my running shoes and that. So yeah, people like think I have two different shoes on, but yeah, they're the best.
So yeah, this is not a paid endorsement or anything. They did give a promo code, and I'm sure Zach can drop it in the chat, and we've shared it a few different times. But after
Woo22,
Woo22, you go to the Caterpie website and type that in, and you get 20 or 22% off. It's a heck of a deal. I'm impressed. Very cool product. Wanted to give them a shout out. They sent some product our way. I've actually had a chance to test it now, and it's pretty cool. With that, we'll be back next week, Thursday night. We'll be in March, and we're going to have our annual physical checkup with our founding dude, Chris Spangle. We'll see you over on the other side with him.